back to the Castle of Lions main room, and we're talking to Benjamin Kaltenecker, the line producer from Voltron Legendary Defender.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be here and see so many Voltron fans. Thank you for having me.
It's great to finally meet you in person.
I know, as Flyer alums, you guys stick together.
Yes, Benjamin and I are both University of Dayton alumni, so this is great. Yeah, go UD.
So we've had Benjamin, we've had you on the podcast. If anybody's looking at our podcast, it's podcast number 97 is our interview with Benjamin Kaltenecker. Also, we had another podcast that we did where we talked about the DreamWorks tour that we took, which you helped facilitate there.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So it was a joy for my wife Kim and I to be able to come into DreamWorks, and this was when you were working on the very last episode.
Sadly, yeah.
Yeah.
It was coming to an end, and I was also doing Boss Baby at the time, too, so I was doubling up on the show.
Wow.
So.
That's just amazing. I mean, you guys were working really hard at the end there, and then you took us around for the whole tour and got us to meet everybody that was still left.
Right.
But it was amazing to see some of the things you were working on at the time. So why don't you walk through for us a little bit about how you got to become the line producer for Voltron Legendary Defender and what a line producer actually does?
Sure. It actually, one of the things to understand that's the same thing about animation of any business that you get in. It's about relationships. It's the relationships that you build, and you build trust amongst, production and amongst artists and directors and producers. And I had the fortune of being a coordinator for Joaquin Dos Santos when he was directing on Justice League Unlimited. And we became, we're both big wrestling fans and UFC, and we just nerded out on all the same stuff, including Voltron. We would have discussions in the early 2000s when we were working together. And then, so we had built a really strong friendship, and then in animation, it's not like other businesses where you go work for a company and you stay at that company, X amount of years. When you're in animation, you work from project to project. So you go from, whatever studio has a job that's available. So we, after Justice League, we kind of separated. He went elsewhere and I did too. And we didn't really have a chance to reconnect because I went into working in features, like the Simpsons movie, and then that killed me. I was like, I don't want to do features anymore. I want to go back to TV. And when I was doing that, I had an opportunity to work on this show called The Legend of Korra, which Joaquin called me and he's like, hey, we need some people. Do you have any interest? And I remember at the time, I was literally this close to taking a job at Disney. No joke, Disney called me as I'm driving to offer me a job, and I said, hey, give me a second. And as I'm driving, I also get a call from Nickelodeon, and I've got sandals and a t-shirt and shorts on, and I'm driving, and the line producer on Korra calls me and he goes, hey, Joaquin recommended you. Could you come in for an interview right now? And I'm like, right now? This is the most unprofessional, I will look for a job interview of all time. But he's like, yeah, just come on in. So I'm sandals and t-shirt, and I walk in and he offers me the job on the spot to be a production manager on the Legend of Korra. And the Silver Pass at Disneyland sounded really, really cool at the time because, you get to do that. But getting to realign with Joaquin and work with him, and also work with Mike and Brian, who I was giant fans of, The Last Airbender, it kind of set that in motion, and so I accepted. And I got to work with Joaquin again, and he and I, again, it was awesome, and then we got Lauren Montgomery to come and join, and also Lauren was a new board artist back on Justice League, but super talented. And then we got to make Legend of Korra, and as Legend of Korra was starting to slow down, DreamWorks TV was starting up. And one of the projects that they were doing, and they were courting Joaquin and Lauren to go showrun, was Voltron. And I didn't know that at first. And then Joaquin kind of calls me in his office, and he's like, hey, I think I'm gonna go over to DreamWorks and run Voltron. And I'm like, who do I have to pay? They don't have to pay me. I will go do this, because if you knew me on the Legend of Korra, my office was decked out in my old Panache place, Voltron toys.
You had a Castle of Lions.
Castle, I had all that stuff, and I know this is sacrilegious, but as a kid, or maybe it's okay, but I used to play with my G.I. Joe guys in the Castle of Lions. Like, they were all friends, you know, and even Optimus Prime would come over once in a while and say hi. So to me, Voltron was my favorite show of all time, and that's why it's bananas, guys, that I'm up here getting to talk about my favorite show that I got to produce. So Joaquin goes over there, and then he's like, can you come over? Well, I was still under contract at Nickelodeon, so I kind of requested to get out of my contract, and they luckily said, okay, when I said, look, it's Voltron, guys, I have to go make that. And to get to work again, we already had Studio Mir in line, and of course they did Legend of Korra, so knowing that it was going to be Studio Mir, knowing it was going to be Joaquin, Lauren, we got Ryu to come over, who's a machine. The only bad thing was, obviously, we didn't get Mike and Brian because they were just still on that road, but it really had to do with relationships and the trust that we had, knowing that, hey, you know, like Joaquin's first time as a showrunner, my first time as a line producer, Lauren's first time as a co-exec, that we had the confidence because we knew that we could work together. So that's how I got there. And I still was pinching myself, like being there and being part of Voltron. Like, it's still to this day, it's just amazing, and what an awesome, you know, series to get to be part of. So that's the short of it. So it all started with relationships on Justice League, and then kind of, you know, you grow and do a, you know, you build trust amongst people, and then that allows you to get through all those hard times, the difficulties. So that's how I got there.
So on the subject of relationships and connections, you're here in the Midwest, and you've got connections here in this area. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm proudly from Columbus, Ohio. Big Buckeye fan. Sorry, everybody from Indiana today. I saw that the game's not too far away. I got a buddy in from Columbus. He drove in this morning, and I was like, should we escape later on today down to Bloomington and go to the game? But I got my wife actually went to Ball State too, so she had family from here, which it was funny when I said I would come for this panel, her sister was living here in Indiana and in Lafayette. And so we were like, oh, we'll make this big family reunion. Well, her sister decided to move to Los Angeles over the summer. So she's out in LA, and she's like, wait, you're going to Indiana and I'm in LA? So yeah, but a lot of, you know, family and friends are, you know, from this area, and I, like you said, graduated from the University of Dayton. So it was also really nice to drive on the freeway here last night as opposed to LA freeways.
The 405?
Oh my gosh, like we were driving, it was like, you know, midnight last night, and we were just driving, I'm like, oh my gosh, why do I feel this calming sense of not 7 cars driving 100 miles an hour behind me? So
ironically, we were all complaining about our drives here.
It's all about perspective. Yeah. I mean, we left the airport at like 2 p.m. and it took an hour and 12 minutes to go 22 miles to LAX yesterday. And we're just like, isn't it still kind of pandemic? Why is everybody, why is this we were in the carpool lane, which you have, and it's an 8-lane highway. It was just, so anyway, it's great to breathe that Midwestern air. It'll clear out the lungs and clear out give some peace of mind.
So I have to say, in honor of you, I brought my own mask.
I wonder what that is. Why would there be any...
Is that Gateway Computers or something?
Yeah, is that Gateway?
Nobody remembers that, Greg, okay?
We do.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Somebody used to sell them, yeah, all right.
So here's the thing, that in the audience here, you might see some references to cows.
Yep.
Why would that be? What's with cows and Voltron Legendary Defender?
So
and how did that come to be?
Yeah, when it was first in the script, again, I read it and I'm thinking, guys, what's going on? I'm a cow, and as the line producer, right, I'm in charge of the money and I'm in charge of the schedule. And they're always trying to push me on it. They're always trying to milk me for more money. They're always trying to milk me for more time. And I was like, is that where this came from? I thought we were friends here, guys. And, really, so Tim Hedrick, who was our story editor, also from Indiana, awesome, and he got to show run Fast and Furious, so another amazing talent, born and bred here in Indiana, so good job, guys. But he was basically saying that it was a one-off joke, and as we've got in the crowd from Area 51, that's awesome. And I sent that picture to Joaquin and Lauren today, and they were just like, that's a deep cut, that's amazing, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing ever. But they were looking for, originally this episode, so when we were, sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. Originally, we looked at our order was for 78 episodes to start. That has never happened in animation, ever. And we were like, we could make episodes about anything. There's plenty of, room for multiple people to have multiple ideas. And Joaquin and I, as kids of the 80s, we loved all that, the kitschy stuff, and we wanted to do a BMX bike episode, and we wanted to do an old school wrestling episode. We had these ideas, and those ideas kind of germinate into other things. And one of the things was, hey, they would go to a mall, which we all went to in the 80s, that's where you hung out with your friends, and they would find a store that is the American store or the US store that just has all these kind of stereotypical things, that we grew up with, and it's well, it should be run by an alien, and what's associated with aliens? Well, it's always farmers getting abducted and their cows getting brought up and probed and whatever they do. So I think they were just let's just throw they were just throwing ideas of all the different things you could have in a store, and they just threw in and we just throw a cow in there. And then I guess they were going, yeah, the cow, our line producer's name is Kaltenecker, but it could be Kaltenecker, people read it wrong. Kaltenecker. Let's just name the cow Kaltenecker, and it's going to be a one line, the guy oh, I'm sorry, Kaltenecker, and the idea was they had abducted so many cows with the farmers that you get a free Kaltenecker with every purchase, because they're eating a lot of their grass, they got to get rid of these things. So it was just that, it was that simple when I was what was this? And Tim was I don't know, man, your name, cow, Kaltenecker, whatever, that's all.
I'm glad it was a cow and not the toilet that's also also in the wine shop for the shop?
Yes, that would be where I'd be like, HR, I need you guys to get involved because this isn't really appropriate.
And Shiro's response when he first sees the cow, is that a cow? He was so incredulous that there would be a cow on the spaceship.
Well, didn't you all have that reaction? You saw a cow on the thing?
But there was one consideration that you were able to have on the cow to make it yours.
That's
What was
right.
that?
So, I'm going to sound like a jerk here. So, when I was at Dayton, I took a semester off and I was like, I'm going to be an actor and I'm going to leave. So I literally packed a backpack and had my cousin drop me off in Chicago. And I was like, I'm going to audition and I'm going to do all this stuff. And so luckily I had a friend also in Chicago. And I remember, it was before cell phones, I remember calling from a payphone and being like, hey man, I'm in Chicago. Can I come crash on your couch? And he's like, you're here? I'm like, yeah. And so I had a backpack, I went in, and I ended up crashing, and then I didn't know what I was going to do, and I auditioned for I saw this audition for like Windy City Players touring acting group, and I was like, oh man, this could be it. So, turns out it was a children's theater tour, and I got the part, and I ended up playing 5 characters. I was like, it was the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And we toured around all the Midwest. We went to like 8 different states. So if you had kids in grade schools in 1998, I probably played the Adventures of Tom Sawyer for your child in the gymnasium there. So when you're on the road, you get really bored when it's just you and like 2 other people and you're away from all your friends. And one of my buddies who actually got me into animation, which we'll talk more, he was like, man, you should go. I was like, I've gone by Ben my whole life, and what's wrong with the jamming part of it? Like, why am I discriminating against the second half of my name? So I was like, I'm gonna start going by Jammin'. And my buddy was like, dude, you should go by B Jammin'. And so I was like, oh, you're a genius. So when I went, after I did this tour, I was like, I never want to be an actor. I want to just get back to school, get my education. This is not for me. And I went back and I'm like, I'm going to go as B Jammin'. Like, it was kind of a social experiment, but it was also kind of like, I was so bored on the road and changed my name to B Jammin'. So Prince did it, and he came up with a symbol for his name. So I also came up with a symbol for B Jammin'. And I put on a couple shows in college called B Jam Mania, because also Hulkamania is a big fan of mine. So I came up with a symbol, and I was like, all right guys, if you're gonna use my name, the branding on the cow should be the B Jammin' symbol. So if you watch it and you see that branding, it all stems from me being a dumbass, basically. It's a really hard symbol to create, so they also kind of had to simplify it too. But yeah, so
This is, I think Mark had initially kind of launched it. He had a 2-part question. The other part is, what are the responsibilities of a line producer?
So, at the end of the day, I'm responsible to make sure the show gets on the network or it gets on the platform that it's supposed to be at. So, you can have all the creative discussions you want. You can have all the, pie in the sky, all these amazing ideas. But it's still a business, and it still has to. All this creativity needs to still work within a framework, and it has to be financially viable, and it has to be on time. So when you think of the job as a line producer, it's kind of like if production, if the foundation is a table and you build everything there, I'm one of those legs of that foundation. So on Voltron, it was Joaquin, Lauren, Ryu, and myself. And on that, Joaquin is building, and Lauren and Ryu are building all the creative kind of storytelling. And then in my end, I'm building the production storytelling. I'm building the budget storytelling. And what that basically means is they can come to me and say, hey, I want to have an episode that's really big, that has all these battles. And I can go, that's great, we can do that for one episode, but the next episode has to be a little bit smaller as far as pencil mileage, as far as design goes. So that's kind of the back and forth that we kind of have to have. So basically when you start a show, you start it with all these assumptions. And those assumptions dictate the schedule, and it dictates the budget. So that you know, and we all want to make the best quality. And you can on a budget, but you have to pick your battles of where. That's why when you watch a lot of anime stuff, there's scenes that are so simplistic, or they have shots where it's just held on a background for seconds and it's just a pan. It's like, that's to give some people some room to breathe so that you can then have all these crazy fight scenes. So I'm not, involved in the creative, like as far as what things look like and what the arcs are, but I am involved in how we tell those arcs and how intense we can be show after show after show. So I hire everybody. I create the schedule. I create the budget based on what is being asked of us. So at DreamWorks, they're like, we want to make a show that basically costs this much money so that it is viable for us, and it's something that's sustainable. Sustainability is another big thing that as a line producer I have to do. When we got this order for 78 episodes, you can make 2 or 3 episodes really awesome.
So when you say 78 episodes, when you were told the budget is for 78 episodes, what was your first thought?
Well, it was Voltron, so I wasn't going to say no. But we were like, I'm sure they'll give us more time. Like, I'm sure we'll get this. Because we made this historic deal with Netflix at the time. DreamWorks did. And to make that work, they had to create these schedules and budgets that had 0 breaks in it. Christmas wasn't accounted for, Thanksgiving wasn't accounted for. So not only that, we had to grind through. Now, every other budget and schedule since that at DreamWorks has taken into account holidays. So usually holidays are like, oh, good, like that's a little bit of catch-up time. For us, it wasn't. It was like, all right, we got to do 5 days worth of work in 2 days so that we can move this forward. So when we saw the 78, we were excited by the challenge. And the thing for us, we were excited because, like I mentioned, we could tell so many stories, and we could really, it wasn't one of those things where it's like, okay, we build a story for 20 episodes, and then we build the 20th episode with a potential ending in case we don't get picked up and we have to like tie everything really quickly together and end it. So we knew that we had that landscape to kind of play with. And we were up to the challenge. Like, this gray hair you see, it wasn't there before I started on Voltron. And Joaquin had more hair, and so did I. So yeah, but it was more like excitement of the challenge, because I think we felt like we were all like in our primes of like energy and again, the IP was just so interesting to us.
So you had mentioned that you had a friend that sort of got you into this business, and there's a lot of people out there that don't know you can work in the animation industry without being a writer, an artist, or an actor. So how can you do that?
And that's it. And like I said, it's about relationships, it's about connections. But the cool thing about animation is you can be a lawyer, you can be an accountant. Like, we need all those people. I don't draw, I don't do voices, and I don't write, but I'm still one of the, through growth and production and learning about it, I'm the person that people now come to, like, how can I get this done? So the way that you do it is, if you want to be a lawyer, you go to law school, and then you look out there as to what studios need, and you'll find, you can go into entertainment law, but you don't necessarily need to do that. But looking on job boards for animation, or getting to know people who make animation, or befriending those kind of people can get you introduced into that world. For me, what had happened was I had a friend in college. I didn't know what I was going to do. I changed my major like 7 times. I was a Spanish major for a while. I was a theater major. I was pre-med. I was everything.
And you still did this all in 4 years?
Well, I didn't become a doctor, but I still went to school for 7 years. So, or over a 7-year period, I should say. But mainly, if you're passionate about animation, and you're like, I want to somehow just be involved in it, there's definitely avenues for that. There's internships for, if you're in college, there's plenty of internships that you won't actually get an art internship. Usually that internship is going to be exposing you to production. And I really do think it's beneficial, even if you want to be an artist, to have a production internship, so that coming into it, you also understand what production kind of has to go through. Because in a negative situation at a studio, production can be viewed as the enemy. But in a positive, you're viewed as peers, you're viewed as people working together to make it happen.
If you're all on the same team, you're trying to make the best product you can.
The thing is, and I've realized this through my experience, that a proper production team is paramount in making the art get through. Because artists just want to make cool art, and sometimes they want to keep drawing and drawing and drawing, and you have to be like, dude, it was good 2 weeks ago, it looked amazing, why are you still doing this? Case in point, man, William New, he was our BG designer, a biz dev artist on Voltron. The dude is the most amazing you've ever met. But when we were building design, he was designing the Castle of Lions. And I'd given him an assignment, and I was like, hey William, can you get this to me in like a week? So a week goes by, and I'm like, all right, it's due today, but I'll give him some more time. And so it's Monday, and I'm like, he still hasn't turned this in. I go over on Tuesday, I'm like, hey William, how's it going? He's like, oh man, yeah, I'm stuck. I'm reading all these mechanical engineering books. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, well, I'm trying to figure out how this would actually be a castle that would have enough firepower to fly, and all the actual making it so that this could actually be created, and it could actually be a thing that flies. And I'm like, it's magic, William. I just need you to give it a cool look on the outside. Don't worry about the inside.
Let me just say in his defense, if I were in his shoes, I would have been that same person.
Oh, I would love it if we could figure that out. But I'm like, dude, we're on a timeline. He's like, but I can do it. I'm like, I believe you can do it. But I just need the outside to look cool. The rest is magic, man.
Did you say to him, have you ever seen Star Trek or Star Wars? They don't really explain how those things work. They just do it.
He's so charming. It was hard to really argue that with him, because you loved his energy and his enthusiasm to, do the best that he could with everything. But that was an example of just needing to set expectations. And that's, I think, a lot of times what production needs to do is go, hey, I don't expect you, I'm giving you 40 hours to do this. I don't expect you to work on this 80 hours. We're budgeted for this. Do the best that you can in 40 hours, and if somebody has an additional note and it's not up to what it needs to be, we can kind of kick it back. So in some ways, almost production is like that teacher. Like when you're given a test, you go, all right, pencils down, and you go, okay, cool, if you need extra help, come see me. Like, it's kind of like that dynamic at times. Like, they're the ones doing the work, they're the ones like powering through, but you're the ones kind of guiding through. And also, you're trying to take care of their mental health, you're trying to take care of, like, you know, artists are a lot of them are more in tune with things, right? So you also want to be very, I mean, I think we're hopefully all in tune with things, but they're like, this is my art. And so it's a very personal expression that they're giving, so you never want to like take that away from them. So that it's a fine line, it's a fine balance. And this is what I say, going back to relationships, you build trust, and you go, hey, I would never ask you to do something, you know, that you wouldn't feel comfortable turning into. So, kind of gets from point A to point.
Reality.
Yeah.
You've got to make it real. I mean, there's the art and the creativity, and everybody wants to be unhindered and just go crazy with it. But it's also a business, and it's got to be done on time and on schedule. Yeah, I did have another question. Mark had mentioned this little thing called Star Trek. And you have, moving on from Voltron Legendary Defender, had worked on Boss Baby Back in Action, which was a phenomenal show. My family greatly enjoyed that on Netflix. And now you're on Star Trek Lower Decks. I finally watched the first episode last night. I love it. And hats off to you. If I were wearing one, I'd take it off to you. So how did you become involved in Star Trek? There are many Star Trek fans here as well.
Yeah, that was, so I was, and my wife just walked out of the room because she was not super happy. So I was on Boss Baby, running smooth. It was awesome. Such Brandon Sawyer, Matt Engstrom. I just had lunch with them on Thursday. Amazing guys. It just really, really good people as well. And again, it's trust. It's all that, right? And so I was on Boss Baby, it was running smooth, and I was about to sign another 3-year deal with DreamWorks. And the cool thing at DreamWorks is they give you 4 months off for paternity leave as a dad. And so this was in early March, and my son was born March 31st.
So I have to ask, was Iggy the boss?
Oh, you guys all heard him crying. He had an agenda for now. He didn't, he either wanted to come up and talk in my stead, or he wanted to go do his own thing. So I was about to sign another 3-year deal with DreamWorks, and the one thing to know, a lot of the talent that we had on Voltron was grown at an animation company called Titmouse. And they're a small company, but they're mighty, and you know the owners. And I always wanted to work at Titmouse because I had heard so many good things about them.
Ben Kalina?
Ben Kalina, yeah, it's Kalina. Dude, everybody pronounces it in different ways. And it's funny, and that's why it's important that when I was at Titmouse too, he's a Ben K, so I had to make sure people knew I was Benjamin K. We would get emails all the time for each other, and I'm like, hey man, so I just got the budget thing for the overall thing, you know, so anyway. But I'm about to sign this deal, and I'm about to get 4 months off of paternity, and Ben reaches out to me, and he's like, hey man, I got a project that might be of interest to you, I don't know what you're doing, and so I go and I have lunch with him, and he's like, yeah, it's a Star Trek Lower Decks project, and I'm like, cool, and I come back and I talk to my wife, and she's like, we're about to have a baby. You have insurance, it's 4 months, full paid paternity leave. Are you kidding me? And I'm like, you're right. So I call Ben and I'm like, hey man, I think this would be great, but it's just not for me. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to, you know, politely decline. And so it happens, and I decline it. And then the person that they hired, that fell through. So 2 weeks later, and I wanted to go. I had been on Boss Baby, and I knew having a kid, I was gonna have to watch all those shows, not only just work on them all the time. And so I had said, you know, I really wanted to go. And 2 weeks later, he calls me and he's like, hey, it fell through. Would you reconsider and you know, produce Star Trek? And I was like, hey babe, can I go meet with the Titmouse guys again? She's like, you want to go there, don't you? And I'm like, I think I do. And literally, I went and talked again, and then, you know, I had to meet with Mike McMahon, awesome writer and he's a showrunner on it. And I remember we're literally at we birthed our kids at a birthing center because we're LA people, and so my wife wanted to birth at home, and I'm like, I gotta draw the line somewhere. We're at least going to. So I'm literally at the birthing center, and I'm negotiating my rate with Ben Kaltenecker while my wife is in getting this, and I was like, it has to be this. And he's like, what if it's this? I'm like, this is the number, and I can sell my wife on it, and we can be good. And so, because the whole time I'm like, it's Star Trek. I'm the space guy, like Voltron. Like, how can I not go and, you know, bring these universes together? And so instead of me having 4 months off, I had 2 weeks off. And, you know, so we're here, we're alive, my son's alive, my wife's alive, so we made it through. But it was one of those things, and again, when I first got on there, I was like, oh, this is where I want to be. Barry Kelly, who basically is show running from the artistic point of view, is an amazing guy. The whole team there, again, amazing. The crew that we were able to put together. Again, relationships, right? And you build trust. And I'm so proud of that show. And I think I was talking earlier to some people that, especially during COVID, because it's a comedy show, but it's also Star Trek. And Star Trek has that fabric of optimism woven through it. It's always about being the best version of yourself that you can be. And so Mike McMahon, he was show-running Rick and Morty at one point, and then Solar Opposites. And those are great shows in and of themselves. But Lower Decks has that positiveness. It's sometimes, you know, you want to have the right balance in your life of not too much pessimism mixed with some optimism. So proud of all those characters, and every actor that was on that was super stoked to be on it. I think we did a really good job of having a very diverse crowd. We actually had a couple of Filipino artists on it, and Phil Sakadraka is directing, who's a buddy of mine from Simpsons, and I was able to bring him on. And I remember him saying, like, he's never had a show where a Filipino character was a major character, so he got to direct on this. So again, it was something that I was really proud of, and it was something that was, again, super tough to leave. So I was having a great time at Titmouse doing Lower Decks, super proud of it. Unfortunately, my character that they made, my hair's shorter, the beard is shorter, but COVID did not do well for the length. You should see, it was down here, it was crazy. And so the character they designed in me, because they designed all the different people on the crew and put them in the shows, but mine was so distinct because of the long beard and the long hair, and really on the crew you're supposed to be a little more clean cut on the thing, so my character didn't really make it into any of the episodes. So, but again, a super positive and such a great company. And if you ever get a chance to visit Titmouse, when I left, they actually sent me a bouquet of Cheryl's cookies with Ohio State emblems on them. And guys, these are the people that run the company. Like, you knew Chris and Shannon, and they text you, and they sent me these cookies like, hey, congratulations, because I guess that's probably the next question is where I'm at now. But they were so proud, you know, of me, and you know, very happy for the next path that I took.
So where are you now?
So now I took an executive position at Netflix as part of, I call it the sparkling wine division. So there was an anime division that's split, and so we're making anime style projects, but just not anime because they're not animated out of Japan. And so right now my job is to find an IP or project that we like and make sure that it checks all the boxes, finding a studio that we can send it to, and then finding a showrunner or somebody and pairing those all together, and then making sure from a production standpoint that all those can happen. And right now I'm up to 60 projects that I'm overseeing.
That's not enough.
You're right. We'll try and get more for you guys. But Dota came out. I actually got to line produce that on the side. Studio Mirror got to animate that as well. There's another project that I was working with Red Dog Culture House, who, a little known secret, they would handle a lot of the Voltron main production episodes while we were going, them in Studio Rev. So trying to build studios around the world that can handle that style of animation. So.
Okay, I want to give everybody here a chance to ask questions too, and I'm going to go around and give them the mic. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. You guys can talk about something while I'm going there.
Besides David's basketball team.
I'll have to ask my brother.
Okay.
Does anybody have a question for Benjamin? I'll start back here.
Hi Benjamin, I was just wondering how long it took per episode from the screenwriting and storyboarding all the way to post-production?
Yeah, that's a great question. Each episode roughly takes about a year, but obviously we don't just make one episode at a time where it's like, it took 78 years to make 78 episodes. So
you look great for 78, by the way.
Hey, thank you. It's all the Botox we get in LA. So, but yeah, it's from conception to completion. It's about a year. Usually the writing is about an 8-week process to get it, and then storyboarding is like a 6-week process, and then you have your animatic stage where you're taking the boards and then you're turning them into basically a comic book with the audio linked to it, playing it in real time, and then it goes to whoever's animating it. They're going to lay it out, so they're basically taking all the backgrounds or all the environments, and they're basically putting it, if it's 16 by 9 or whatever your aspect ratio is, they're going to place those out for all the different layouts that you've had. So if you have an episode that has 400 scenes in it, and again, this goes back to creating your assumptions of like, hey, how big can we be with this show? What is our scene count? Because it's all pencil mileage. So you have a layout process of taking all the backgrounds, putting them on proper model perspective. Then from there, once that's done, you're doing your rough animation pass, where it's just like really broad strokes of trying to get the emotion and the energy in it. And then from there, it goes into cleanup animation, where you're taking people that can put things on model and really make any move in perspective and still stay true to the character's form. From there, it goes into, they're painting everything, and after it's painted, it goes into a compositing. And we can actually fix a lot of not inconsistencies, but things that might not look as pretty. You can fix a lot of that in comp, and it's not that Mir wasn't great, but they're amazing at comp. And so anything you see with like particulate or environment or creating depth of field, a lot of that time it was in compositing. Once that's done, they're going to give us a render. That render gets done, and then we get the take ones and we're noting it. And then we usually have about a 6 to 7 to 10 week post schedule to where we're calling retakes back and forth, and we're sending it back to them, getting things adjusted. Maybe something doesn't look right, or we want to compose something. And while that's going on, you have your music, and then you've got your automated dialogue replacement, so your ADR is going on, which I should have said after the script's written, it's being recorded, obviously, and then it goes into the boards. While boards are getting done, that's when design is also happening, because you want to have your animatic, you want to know just how many designs are going to be in it based on what the artist drew. So then like I said, then you've got your post department, you run it through QC. Once QC is approved, which QC is just making sure there's not pops and blips and, you know, frames that are missing. So that's all kind of fixed, so that if anything in the render isn't correct, they can fix. And then once that's done, they export it, and then we would send it to Netflix, and they would translate it in however many different languages, and then it would get on the platform. So about a year, and that's the quick and dirty of what that process is.
Okay, any other questions for Benjamin?
If you could pick one character from Voltron to guest star on Star Trek Lower Decks, who would it be?
Lance.
Hey, you always said if there was a chance to do scratch voice for Lance, you always wanted to be
I
it,
always
right?
did Lance. He was my favorite. Of course I was in love with Princess Allura too, so maybe that's why I was, Lance. But I think he's grown. He was the character I want to say that grew the most throughout the show, is to like kind of being more like goofy and directionless a little bit, or not directionless, but just being a goof to being very like responsible and very well spoken, like not well, but very like he just had such a pure heart by the end, and I think that he would probably be a little goofy on the Lower Decks thing, but then once he got comfortable, he would probably be that true self, his true self. So.
Other questions? Anyone?
Oh, same guy? Another question?
Hold on.
It's like Phil Donahue.
Yeah.
I was just curious about the communication with Studio Mirror, since they're based out of Korea. Like, did you have a translator, or how did that working relationship work out?
So, and again, my wife's not here, but she says that, so their translator, she's also one of their business associates. Her name's Sandy. She would always call her my work wife, because one of the things about communication is I would talk to Studio Mirror every single night, like 4 nights in a row. And it usually would be at like 9 p.m. my time till 10 p.m. or 10 p.m. till 11 p.m. And I would always talk with them just to see how things are going. So Marc Taylor, he's a legend in the animation world. He ran Netflix for he ran Nickelodeon for a long time. And he always said that 1 + 1 = 1. So when we are DreamWorks working with a partner studio, it's not us versus them or us with them, or it's us as one team. So that was like this mantra that we would always have. It's like, we're one team, and the best way for us to be one team was to communicate. And Sandy is the best translator in all of Seoul, I believe. And so our kickoff meetings, man, that would take about 3 or 4 hours, because everything we said had to be translated. But we had an ace in the hole, because we had Kyung Ryu, and he was is from Seoul, and he was on our team. So anything that wasn't fully able to be explained, with the right wording, he would also be able to help correspond. But that having a translator who's good is, because again, it's relationships, it's communication, and so whatever can build that the best sets you up for success. So we had a translator. Every email we would send would have to get translated by 1 or 2 people. So we also had to be very judicious about how much emails we sent, how many words we would use in an email. So trying to be simple to get your point across was always important. But it's a great question. So.
Show of hands for questions. Oh, hold on.
I should have come over there.
The whole production of Legendary Defender to me seems very high quality, like from the voice acting to the animation to the scripting. And I was just wondering, I noticed there's a lot of nods to old school anime, and of course Go Lion, but there's things like the Syncline Mac looking like Evangelion, or Roy Fokker showing up in like the first couple episodes. TM. And I was just wondering how much of that was written into the script and how much of it was the animators just having fun.
It was us. It was us going. It was Joaquin or Laura. I mean, I think I said this before on the podcast, but Voltron was my dream show. And I remember being like, what do I do after this show? Like, do I just retire? Because what am I going to work on that's better than Voltron? And Robotech was one that we all were like, if we could make one after this, could we do a Robotech? But yeah, it just came from, you know, the influences of all of us and what we kind of gravitated to and what, you know, homage we wanted to pay to the previous things that we all loved. But I do want to give a shout out to, we had Andrea Romano doing the voice directing of this. She's the best, and I think the talent that we got, it was so awesome to, and Stephen Yoon is blowing up, man, like it was so great to have him on, and they all like just built this giant friendship, and I think it comes across in the way that you hear, you know, you feel it, and it was the same way with all the artists, because that was the other thing I failed to mention is we brought like almost all the same artists from Korra onto Voltron, so there was already kind of like a shorthand knowledge that we had with each other. It's like, hey, Christine Beyond, just go nuts with this. Just, what do you want to make? Have fun with this. And Christy Sang is just a freaking amazing character designer. You know, so we had so much talent on there that it was, like I said, I mean, everybody says it about their crew, like, this is the best crew ever. Like, hopefully everybody says that. But it was, I mean, these are my friends for life, you know, and these are people that I still, you know, even though we're not working together, we're still chatting. So I think it comes across that all of us got to have a little bit of a say. So it would be like I suggested a few people to you know, hey, can we get this actor? Can we get this person? You know, Lauren, that mermaid episode, that was all her. She wanted a mermaid episode. I think it was awesome, and we wanted Weird Al Yankovic to play, you know, Plum Fum, and we got him, and then we wanted the guy from Vince from Chop Shop or whatever it was to play in the mall episode. So we got to all kind of have like, you know, there was enough love to go around for people to kind of use some of their old influences or things that you know, inspired them.
Okay, we have another question.
So from production point of view, when we're watching the credits, we just see animators. But how large are the teams to work on character design versus background design? Is there a big difference?
So character design, it's a little less pencil mileage for, you know, so you don't need as big of a team of character designers as you do for background design. Background design is much more, you know, you're creating an entire world, so to speak. So what always happens for me is we under budget for design, but you have a big budget for freelance. So I think at some point we had like 12 background designers working on an episode at a time. And I think at most we probably had 3 or 4 character designers working. So a lot of because when you're building an entire environment, like first thing is perspective, getting that right. Like when you're a character designer, you can almost take other models that you've done that have similar body structures and start with that as your kind of starting point, right? And then you embellish from there, you add from there. So the 2 positions, and not to take away from them, but a lot of times the ones with the least amount of pencil mileage are going to be your characters and your props. And when I say props, like these types of props, obviously the lions, those were kind of a combination of like, hey, some prop designers are better at like, you know, vehicular stuff. So, but let's have them handle like the robotic stuff, but then when it comes to the facials, let's give that to a character designer so that they can kind of add that. And we did that a lot with Voltron, so we had multiple different artists kind of working on different parts of what their strengths were. But usually background it's because I mentioned before, the first stage is layout, and basically you're laying out the background. So background is always the thing that would get behind, because we would want to go to as many different locations as possible, and that's where you have to come in and be like, guys, we're going to 12 new locations here. Can we cut it down to 8? Can we cut it down to 10? So that we're not just killing our background design. But yeah, board artists are pretty standard, that you would have like 3 per team. And usually we would have 3 teams, so they would be working, in tandem with each other. So you'd have about 9 board artists on a team. But usually background design, that's the thing that is every production I've ever been on, because it's the world you're creating. So I hope that answers it. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's going to wrap it up. We're here for time. We want to thank Benjamin Kaltenecker for joining us.
Thank you guys. Thanks for coming out. It was awesome.
Benjamin will have a table in the space wall, so you'll be able to come by and say hi to Benjamin.
Yeah, I'll head over there and hang out. And you might get to meet my son if he's not crying. So, and my daughter. We got a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. We flew here from Los Angeles yesterday, and it was like, they were great on the flight. I was the one going like, can we just hurry up and get there? So, anyways.
All right, well, thank you
so much.
Thanks, everybody.
for joining.